Thanks for returning to Noir Alley. I'm your host, Eddie Muller. When I first learned of the legendary film we're showing today on Noir Alley, I wasn't even old enough to drink. I was around 15, in the early stages of my obsession with movies, and I'll admit a lot of that interest stemmed from an infatuation with actresses of the classic Hollywood era. I definitely had a thing for the bad girls like Gloria Graham, Marie Windsor, and Audrey Totter, sexy fixtures in what I'd come to know as film noir. Then one day, an older movie buff told me I hadn't seen nothing until I'd seen an actress named Ann Savage. In today's film, a grungy little B movie called Detour, made in 1945, Savage played a character known only as Vera, whom this guy promoted as the meanest woman in the history of the movies. Seeing as this was long before the advent of TCM, or even the invention of the video cassette recorder, there was no way to see Detour except to study the weekly TV guide and wait for it to show up on Movies Till Dawn or some other dead of night telecast. And that's exactly how I first experienced it. And dare I say, it may be the ideal way to absorb this strange, unsettling film, in a state where you're not quite sure whether you're watching it or dreaming it. So if you're barely awake right now, perfect. Detour was made at Poverty Row Studio PRC, which stood for Producers Releasing Corporation. Folks in Hollywood joked that it really meant pretty rotten crap. And the name was fairly accurate, at least until director Edgar G. Ulmer started working there. One of a number of talented directors who'd emigrated to Hollywood from Germany to escape the Third Reich, Ulmer had been blackballed at every major studio after having an affair with Shirley Castle, wife of director Max Alexander, whose uncle, Carl Laemmle, was chief at Universal, and saw to it that Ulmer was relegated to Poverty Row for the remainder of his filmmaking career. But he couldn't stop Ulmer from being a wildly creative director, even on the most meager budgets. In adapting Detour from Martin Smith's more expansive novel, Ulmer took the tale, which told parallel stories about Al Roberts and his girlfriend, Sue Harvey, and streamlined it into a nightmarish tale of one man's cross-country misadventure and how his life runs off the rails when he picks up Vera, the hitchhiking harpy from hell. Ann Savage and Tom Neal had previously made several pictures together when they were under contract at Columbia. For various reasons, both of them fell out of favor at the studio and both ended up at PRC, which in 1945 was like stumbling from the curb to the gutter. But amazingly, under Ulmer's inspired direction, working on a super short schedule and minuscule budget, Neal and Savage ended up making the film for which they are both remembered. Few films of this era got so much out of so little. Detour remains a touchstone for low-budget filmmakers, not only because of the resourcefulness Ulmer displays as a director, but because the film is unique in its use of an unreliable narrator relating, true or not, the tale of his downfall. Along with Arthur Ripley's The Chase, made the following year, this is the rare Hollywood film of the era that has the unsettling rhythms and what the hell is happening momentum of a genuine nightmare. Fasten your seatbelts and don't stop for strangers. From 1945, here is Detour. Once in a while, I encounter a movie fan who just doesn't get why Detour has such a lofty reputation. It's hard for some people to get past the film's shabbiness. They think it's badly made and outrageously acted. But to its ardent fans, Detour works brilliantly on its own terms. Great films create their own internal logic, aka suspension of disbelief, which savvy filmmakers can infuse into viewers almost subliminally. If they can manage that, then objective standards of believability or authenticity, they don't really matter. Movies don't have to feel like real life. In this case, it's more like someone's desperate and delirious retelling of a wild yarn. Given its 67-minute length and paltry budget, director Edgar G. Ulmer had no time or money to waste. His strategy was to tell this tawdry tale in a heightened, almost surreal shorthand that has nothing in common with most films of the time. Detour's impoverished, ramshackle feel is the very thing that makes it so distinctive and memorable. Parallels between the lives of Al Roberts and Tom Neal, the actor who played him, have become the stuff of B-movie legend. Some have suggested that this film's strange power haunted Neal, causing the film's fatalism to infect the actor's real life. Neal was touted as the poor man's Clark Gable, and he worked steadily in B's during the 1940s, developing a reputation as a solid pro and quite the ladies' man. It was a passionate affair with blonde starlet Barbara Payton that detoured his career. The pair were torrid lovers, as Payton recounted in her autobiography, I Am Not Ashamed. He had a chemical buzz for me that sent red peppers down my thighs. But when she decided to marry Franchot Tone in 1951, Neal saw red. The boxer laid a savage beating on Tone. He didn't, however, lose Payton. She walked out on Tone after 53 days, naming Neal as correspondent in the divorce suit. Their tempestuous on-off affair had ugly overtones that sullied both their careers. Neal quit the business, moved to Palm Springs, and married Patricia Fenton. He started a landscaping business and had a son, Tom Jr. But Patricia died of cancer when the boy was only a year old, and Neal sent him to live with a sister in Illinois. He met Gail Cloke at the Palm Springs Tennis Club and married her in 1961. 4 years later, Cloke was shot to death, and Neal was arrested for the murder. Despite some damning evidence that would indicate first-degree murder, Neal claimed it was an accident, but the gun was never found. He was sentenced to prison for involuntary manslaughter. He was freed after 6 years, but several months later died of heart failure in a Hollywood apartment. His son, who'd come to California to live with him, found the body. In 1992, Tom Neal Jr. starred in a remake of Detour, recreating the role made famous by his father. I met Ann Savage more than 25 years ago. We were introduced by Ariane Ulmer Sipes, the daughter of Detour's director. I ended up including Ann's amazing life story in my book, Dark City Dames, The Wicked Women of Film Noir, in which I profiled 6 actresses, all synonymous with our favorite genre. Some of these women, like Jane Greer and Audrey Totter, were nothing like the femme fatales they played on screen. I'd be lying, however, if I didn't admit there was more than a little bit of Vera in Ann Savage. Quick story. Ann and I met for lunch to discuss if she'd be open about her life enough to be part of my project. For several hours, she sketched out the highs and lows of her remarkable story. Then she invited me back to her apartment, just off Sunset Boulevard. We had a couple of cocktails, and she showed me some of her cherished mementos. And just before I was about to leave, she took my arm and said, Eddie, please come into my bedroom. Well, I followed her in, and she surprised me by saying, I want to show you something. Get down on your knees. Well, trust me, when Ann told you to do something, you did it. And then she said, look under the bed. And there on the floor, laid out on a big bath towel, was Ann's personal arsenal, clean as a whistle and freshly oiled. A pair of handguns, a hunting rifle, and a shotgun. She looked down at me and said, I'll do the book with you, and now you know better than to cross me. I'm pleased to report that next year you'll once again be able to experience Ann's amazing story when Dark City Dames is reissued in a revised and expanded edition. In the meantime, you can catch me live next weekend at the Noir City DC Festival in Silver Spring, Maryland. It runs from October 11th to the 24th at the AFI Silver Theater. Check the website shown here for titles and times. If you can't make that, I'll be right here as well, with a 1949 film making its debut on Noir Alley. John Payne and Ellen Drew star in The Crooked Way, another noir featuring the exceptional camera work of Lichtmeister John Alton. In the meantime, do I even have to tell you? Never stop for hitchhikers.
Next on TCM, The Killing Fields, then Withnell and I, and later, The Little Shop of Horrors. TCM feeds you more classics tonight.